Hi, folks. Welcome to another episode of Film Study. This is Ken McCusick, and it's time for today's camp notes from the Ravens training camp. Macro level, the biggest two things were the fact that this is the first practice in pads, which is always nice to see. It's always a shorter practice, an hour and 45 minutes today. The first practice in pads. A lot of people talk to it as graduating to pads. The other thing, Lamar Jackson, again, not present. Apparently the illness is continuing. He left the one practice he did make out of 5 thus far. He left early. Chad Steele came in, told the press corps before the game that he was continuing to work with the medical staff to evaluate. He was asked, it is still just an illness concern, not something else. The answer is yes. So anyway, hopefully overall not terrible news or anything, but he passed the word on early. With him out, the passing offense continued to struggle for much of the day. There were a couple good plays towards the end of practice made, and I'll talk about those, but a big struggle for the offense today. We'll get into it in more depth. Absent from the practice, aside from Jackson, Keaton Mitchell and TJ Tampa are both on PUP. Adisa Isaac on NFI. Vandy Rigby missed his 5th straight day. Starting to get tough to envision him making the team at this point, given the time he's missed, but anyway, hopefully he can get back on the field. Kyle Van Noy missed practice. He's the first other Raven than those big 5 there to miss practice so far this camp. Harbaugh labeled it as a neck thing. Didn't say anything more than that, but obviously not an ideal situation. But he was out today. So I came into practice and we were on the far field, the third field, which is the really nice field for the offensive line, being in right position for me to get up close and watch. Coach D was back and had a bunch of things he was running today. So I'll just go through that briefly. Some brace drills, which are pass blocking drills the offensive line does to try and simulate them having not good hand placement and being able to still hold off a lineman. So one of the other offensive linemen comes at them, has both hands on them. I guess there may be some rocking effort on there, but there's probably some brother-in-law action in there too. And the offensive lineman just kind of holds his arms behind his back and kind of balances on his feet either way to match the action of the opponent that he's got. So interesting drill there. And I have not seen that run often. I'm sure they run it every year, but I have not seen it run often before. Lots of pass protection drills today using full line pressure simulations. So a lot of the Coach D stuff is really working up from individual and half line stuff and not a ton of full line stuff, but they had, pads were on today. This was a good day to make the best use of that time to do some full man pressure simulations. You still have opponents, basically other offensive linemen who are just a guy with a pad, but you had opportunities, whether it was in pass protection or in run blocking, to try and block those guys effectively with the full unit at the same time. So they took advantage of that. They did a nice goal line and short yardage drill where they got under that big black frame. And you may not have seen that in the back corner of the practice field there. And you wonder what's that for? It's to simulate when they need to do short yardage or goal line type blocking. And it's all about really staying low. And the linemen have to squeeze themselves under that thing. Then they have to kind of shoot out from under it into a padded simulated defender opposite them. So they're not actually running into a live body that's, 25% as good as it could otherwise be. But when you see the trouble these big guys have and getting under this large frame, there's a lot of stiffness involved. Ben Cleveland, a lot of difficulty getting underneath. There's some difficulty from Daniel Fa'alele, who's an enormous human being, getting underneath. Everybody is really careful about their head, even with the shorter guys. The shorter guys are 6'3" or 6'4", so they're not really small. But the larger linemen definitely having trouble getting underneath. Daniel Fa'alele really took his time coming out from under that. So you're supposed to shoot out from underneath that device. And he really kind of took an extra half step coming out of it. So it wasn't kind of the ideal drill for him. And I think, in real life, when he faces some goal line situations, pad level will be an issue, obviously, but he also has enormous mass that he relies on more in those situations, and length than his pad level. Ben Cleveland had some problems staying low coming out as well. One of the things I noticed with Ben Cleveland is he kind of stands up naturally, and that may be something that's really held him back with the Ravens. Is standing up coming out of that. You really need to submarine, stay low. It's a case where you're often, both the offense and the defense may be willing to give themselves up at the point of contact to try and create a mass of bodies if you're the defender, or a lower hedge which a running back can leap over. If you're the offensive player, you may be thinking of it that way. So Cleveland definitely had some problems staying low, and the one thing you don't want to do in short yardage is get stood up directly by that defender. Tayshawn Manning had a really nice pancake of Salah, who was the simulated defender on his play. Nice to see Manning have a moment. He got some coaching as things were moving on here. So he did some full line combination blocking after that. Combination blocking, for those who don't know, you have 2 blocks on a single player to begin with, and then one releases and climbs to level 2 and hits a level 2 defender, or a bug, as Travell Wharton was calling them the other day. But Manning had a nice combo and climb, but he got some coaching after the next rep, not getting off his block quickly enough, it appeared. So some good, some bad. Daniel Faalele and Nick Samak both got some coaching after their reps. So nobody was immune really today. Coach D likes to get fine, and if he sees even a pretty good rep, it's still like, great, let's do it again, like a Hollywood director a lot of times. And so he has things to say. But good to see him back, and I thought he did a interesting set of drills today with pads that really took advantage of it. Let's get back to the overall thoughts on the day, because a lot of 11-11 play, some 7-on-7 and some 11 on colors as well, but a lot of 11-on-11 play, including 2 fields for a portion of the day. So they split the team, and they don't really have a big shortage of players at any position. The one position where they do have a shortage of players is at quarterback. So it's nice to be able to split and to still have enough players to get by on 2 fields. But we saw some really disorganized play, I would say, from the offense. Was probably the way I would tag the day at the highest level. Josh Johnson was flagged for a delay of game on his very first snap, his very first snap of 11-on-11 after they split the fields. And then on the very next play, he was, or the next 3 plays, he was sacked twice and pressured a 3rd time. So, he's not able to get rid of the ball easily. Offensive line play, no doubt, has played a portion in that. The defense also is coming in hot, and the defense did not let up all day in terms of schemed efforts to get to the quarterback. So they were coming at the quarterback from level 2, level 3. I can't talk about exactly how, but we had the slot corner was in a few times. Brandon Stevens had a sack. We'll get to a little bit later, but a bunch of sacks and just a relentless pressure scheme that they're taking advantage of pads, and the offense has got to deal with it as best they can. And a very tough day anyway for a set of backup quarterbacks effectively without Lamar. Immediately after Josh Johnson had his delay of game, then Leary also had, I'm sorry, it wasn't Leary then, it was Emory Jones had a delay of game. So the field has been split. Johnson and then Jones was after him. Jones had delay of game on his first play. So Johnson's was also on the first play. That's really a bad look, guys. Really a bad look, because it means that they're not organized enough. They don't have the play, and the new group of players that's going on with the quarterback in a lot of cases, and usually would be other substitutions, just does not have it together in terms of being able to get to the line of scrimmage and know what the play call is. So that was bad. And the fact that it happened to both Johnson and again to Emory Jones is not something. By the way, Leary had a delay of game later in practice as well. So the offense, it really looked bad for them today in terms of a lot of their, just even getting to the line of scrimmage. Let's see. Daryl Simpson, we always want to know about the laps for a false start. He had one later in practice. There was a very brief scuffle on the field between Justice Hill and Trenton Simpson. It's really a whole big nothing. A couple guys playing hard, ran into each other on a pass block where Hill blocked Simpson hard. The play was whistled dead for a sack. And the two of them kind of pushed each other back and forth for about 1.5 seconds, I would say, after the play, and then it was over, and they went back to their respective sides. Let's talk a little bit, talk a little bit about the offensive winners and losers, and there's definitely some of both on that side. One sec. So Johnson, as I mentioned, I don't know if I mentioned this, pressured very frequently on the day. The defense just relentless in terms of what they were doing. Leary also suffered from some pressures, even though he's getting rid of the ball quickly a lot. Both Leary and Jones, I kind of felt like got a set of play calls for them that was more of an opportunity for them to get the ball out quickly. They looked more like Joe Burrow trying to run the Bengals offense against the Ravens defense. And a lot of balls are out quickly to the outside. It's just not a lot of chances taking the ball or taking chances with the ball down the deep part of the field, either on the sideline or in the middle. And I just felt like they had a probably an either easier set of throws than Josh Johnson was assigned. Let's see. Emory Jones had a nice pair of consecutive throws, one to Bateman covered by Harrison, and another to Sean Ryan covered by Eddie Jackson, that were both middle of the field, 10 to 15 yards each. There just weren't a whole lot of successive plays like that on the day where quarterbacks were doing well. So that was really kind of stood out in my notes. Let's see what else we got here. Isaiah Likely had a nice play to outmaneuver Eddie Jackson for a good yak on a pass that was only to the line of scrimmage. Remember I talked about getting rid of the ball quickly. There's also some getting rid of the ball under pressure. This was one of those. Likely caught the ball, juked Jackson, and he did make a nice yak play, maybe 15 yards. I would have estimated it to be off that action. So good play by Likely there. Johnson sailed a 10-yard pass well over the head of Derrick Henry. It wasn't in interception territory. It landed in a free area, but that short a pass you do not normally see thrown that inaccurately. So it's worth mentioning. Devin Leary overthrew Walker down the left sideline. Walker's been one of the definitely has had a number of plus moments these first few days. Harbaugh talked about him a little bit in the interview, said he's also had some negatives, and I would tend to agree with that. But I think he's one of the offensive players actually has looked pretty good, and definitely you can see there's real potential there in terms of speed for sure. I haven't really seen the route running be as big a deal. Most of it's been basically a pure raw speed and some separation that he's had to date. But in this case, ball was overthrown by Leary down the left sideline. Good converging coverage from the combination of JAD and Ardarius Washington on that play was coming in from safety. See, Emory Jones got intercepted by Sanusi Kane on a ball that was initially tipped by Kadar Holman. That's the number 3s out there playing on the field all at that time with Kane and Holman out there. Holman, interesting character because he came into the league, I think it was 5 years ago, almost an identical CV or resume to Quinyon, the first round, Quinyon Mitchell, the first round draft pick this year, one of the top corners in the entire draft. But they both came out of Toledo, both very similar speed profiles. And Kadar Holman, it hasn't worked out for him. He's a 4.39 guy coming out of college, but he hasn't been able to really make that work at the NFL level. Hopefully he's getting a chance with the Ravens so that he can turn into some real playing time and turn his career around. So anyway, nice for him to get his hand on the football. And then, of course, the interception to Kane is also nice because wherever Sanusi Kane ends up for the Ravens, whether it's the top of the practice squad as the 5th safety on the team, used primarily as a dime back, whatever it may be, or just a special teams player even, he's a guy who needs to be able to find the football when it's tipped. Because he's not going to be a guy that I would see playing off the line of scrimmage at all. He'll be a dime back or pretty much nothing. I don't really see him. I guess it could happen in a nuclear scenario where you have a lot of injuries that he might end up on the back end or playing strong safety as a run fit guy. But I see him much more as a dime back or guy you'd have playing, closer to the line of scrimmage. Probably also a very bad scenario for the Ravens if he's in, because it'll mean something has broken down with the inside linebacker duo of Roquan Smith and Trenton Simpson, or maybe on the defensive line, and the Ravens are forced to play some 32 dime. But there's not really, it's not easy to envision how a Sanusi Kane gets on the field as a rookie here. But wherever he is, he better be able to find the football in the air. So nice to see him do it on that play. Johnson lost the handle on a football on what may have been an intended jet toss. It kind of looked like it might have been just a pull back from a jet motion handoff, and then he started running it, and he lost the handle on the football. It looked like it was kind of independent of the jet action, I'll say. I don't think he was bumped and the ball came loose. It looked like it came loose after that. Kind of like some Kyle Bowler fumbles of the distant past. A lot of older fans or even middle-aged fans will remember, I'm sure, fairly well, of the way he would, have about as much control as the football as a squirrel carrying a nut over a distance with a car coming at him, kind of thing. It really would lose the ball on his own a fair amount. So anyway, this wasn't a good look, and unfortunately lost that ball. Nelson Aguilar outraced the defense for an apparent TD on a play that may have been blown dead already on a sack by Pepe Williams. Probably should have been. Gives you an idea. Pepe Williams coming out of the secondary is another case of the defense not letting up, but Nelson Aguilar didn't let up either, and he raced past the defense on that play. Owen Wright had a really nice pass blocking rep versus Deadrin Senat, who's a defensive lineman you probably haven't heard of. Wears number 69, I think. Let me take a look and make sure I've got that correct. Yeah, Deadrin Senat is actually number 93. And he knocked him to the ground as a pass blocker. It was one of these ones where Senat was just starting to get his head of steam, and Wright came up in the pocket to make the attack nice.
Every year, data breaches are on the rise. In 2022, the number of victims shot up nearly 41.5% from the previous year. And your personal information is at risk. With hundreds of commercial databases ready to be hacked, and that number of victims, it keeps going up each year. Plus, the U.S. has another big data privacy problem, the people search sites. You guys have all seen these. These are websites that create detailed personal profiles on millions of Americans and then publish them online for anyone to see. Your address, your phone number, even family details are just a click away. But there's a way to protect yourself. Meet Incogni. Incogni reaches out to data brokers on your behalf, requests the removal of your personal data, and handles any objections they may have. This means less stress for you and more peace of mind. With Incogni, you can safeguard your information from cyber criminals who steal social security numbers and other sensitive personal data to commit identity theft. Imagine the relief of knowing that your personal data is no longer easy prey for hackers. Incogni also protects you from data brokers selling your information to companies to target vulnerable and disadvantaged groups, exposing you to even more discrimination. These lists with titles like Tough Start, Young Single Parents, Rural, and Barely Making It can harm you both online and offline. Don't let your personal data fall into the wrong hands. Take control with Incogni today. Visit incogni.com/filmstudy and safeguard your privacy now. It's time to reclaim your digital security. That's Incogni/filmstudy. INCOGNI.com/filmstudy. Incogni, your shield in a digital world.
Attacking play, as you like to see. He bounced back a little bit too, but Senat bounced off his pretty hard contact, frankly, for a practice, and went to the ground. So it certainly looked like Owen Wright got the better of that contact, which is surprising given there's about 100 pounds or so of difference between those two. So nice play there by Owen Wright. Isaiah Likely beat Nate Wiggins for a touchdown. Fairly late in practice. That came from Devin Leary, a 10-yard play between the numbers and the right hash as I saw it over the top. And Wiggins just a little bit beat on the play, honestly, maybe relying on his makeup speed again. And we saw a nice play from Likely, a nice throw from Leary touchdown. Leary, just a few plays later, came back on the field for the last play of practice and threw a nice 10-yard fade to Tez Walker, also over Nate Wiggins. So Wiggins, kind of a tough practice for him, certainly beat a couple times. He did have a decent play or two, but this is not going to be one that he remembers, and it's not going to be one he remembers fondly because of the way it ended. So whatever he'd built up in terms of some decent plays earlier in practice kind of got wiped off the board with a late lead, kind of like your closer giving up a 6-3 lead in the ninth inning. Not that means anything to us, or a 6-1 lead in the eighth inning, like the Orioles did against Miami the other day. All right. Let's talk about the defense a little bit. Move on over there. A lot more praise for the secondary to come. A lot more praise for some of the pass rushers. I mentioned that they kept on blitzing all the day. Nick Wiggins had a couple nice plays. I mentioned some of his bad ones already. Arthur Mollett had a sack off slot corner. Didn't really see too much of Mollett in coverage, which is probably a good thing. If they're not throwing up Mollett, that is probably a good thing in terms of not seeing him on the play. We've seen him make a lot of plays in camp already, including one interception, I think 2 other near interceptions several days ago. So he's a guy who seems to be having a very good camp. Right after Mollett's sack, on the very next play, Hamilton and Tavius Robinson came in to sack Johnson. Blown dead, no doubt about it, sack. And the fact that they're able to get in with a combination like this is the kind of compound pressure efforts that the Ravens were very successful with in 2023 in building up that 60 sack year. So nice to see that. Also nice to see Tavius Robinson have a pass rush result. I didn't have a particular one for him. I was probably more focused on allocating pressures today than I had been to date. So it was a little better. I had a little better scheme for setting up my notebook to do that. And I think I'm going to stick with it because I think it's a little easier to catch who's getting the pressures. And Tavius had a good one here in this game, today rather. One play later than that. So they had a sack, then they had another sack. And then the very next play, Owen Wright ran the ball right, and he was thrown to the ground by Robinson. And you don't, even though it's padded practice, you don't tackle players in this. You grab them, you hold them up, and then the play's over. And in this case, it was probably Wright trying to wiggle free of the tackle from Robinson or the hold up from Robinson, and Robinson shoved him as that was happening and put him on the ground. That's how I saw it. Anyway, but you don't like to see that kind of contact, but a nice play from Robinson to make the stop there. Bump Cooper, that's a name who's been a guy who's been beaten some this camp. Had an interception on this day. Was tipped up from Malik Cunningham. So Cunningham's had a pretty good camp, I'd say. Of the receivers, there haven't been a lot of guys who've been looking great. But Cunningham, a few crossing routes here and there. He's looked fast. He's generally looked a little bit sudden, I would say, as a receiver. I don't think he's the guy we're going to fall in love with as a receiver. Dayton Wade might be that guy in terms of the preseason, but as you're trying to set up your Valentine's Day card list for that receiver you just love in camp, that's not going to make the team no matter what you think of him. Those two guys might be on the list, and it can be said that a player like Tylan Wallace may be fighting for a roster spot this year. He's in his 4th year, whereas a player like Wade or Cunningham, who the Ravens have several years of team control remaining, it's more likely that the Ravens would want to keep that kind of player. It's also probably more likely that in either of those cases, they're likely to be able to keep them on the practice squad. So, it'd be interesting to see how that goes around. Malik Cunningham is a guy that, if he can be your 3rd quarterback, has some real value, and that might be a reason why the Ravens want to keep him. The Ravens are always really good about figuring out those last roster spot values. And if Cunningham could be the 3rd quarterback and he only can enter the game as a quarterback, but then after he enters the game as a quarterback, he could also be a receiver kind of thing. I don't know. Maybe I can't convince myself that would really have value, but it could be a case where Cunningham might be the 3rd quarterback the team keeps just because of seniority here. And let's face it, Josh Johnson is 38, 39 years old, whatever he is. And however long he's here for, he is a Band-Aid, a temporary solution, not a permanent guy. So we'll see about Malik. Moving on, Brandon Stevens had a sack, which appeared to come between the B gaps. Now, the reason I say that is oftentimes an outside corner, when he gets a sack, will come on a straight line off the edge, usually a C gap, and it may be a B gap, but this more looked like it was inside of, kind of the outside range, or a quickly fanning tackle, which would make it be the B gap, who a outside corner comes to the inside of. It wasn't like that. This is more like inside, much closer to the guard space. It might have even been to that side of the left guard that his blitz came. And he delivered a sack on that play. He also had a pass defensed by the sideline in coverage of Tez Walker. He added another pass defense when he separated Zay Flowers from the football. That was about 5 yards between the numbers and left hash. It was a short play, but the kind of play where he kind of hit Flowers on the play and didn't really play the ball as much, more like was hitting Flowers on the arms and torso a little bit to loosen that football, which Flowers was unable to haul in. Brent Urban had a pressure on an incomplete pass. He wrapped up Henry on a run middle. Looks like he's playing good ball. Brent Urban is really been now a survivor in this league, and it looks like he's going to play this season. I would have said his spot is one of the ones that's really up for grabs on the defensive line. We've seen Broderick Washington play fairly well in camp so far. He would have been a guy who probably is not in jeopardy this year, but might be a 2025 casualty to the cap. But he's played fairly well, and I think that Urban has played well, and I think is a pretty good chance, assuming nobody gets hurt, that they start the season with the same 5 defensive linemen again. So we'll see how that plays out. Pepe Williams, he held up on a sack that was not whistled on Aguilar's TD. I believe I mentioned it earlier, but that play probably should have been blown dead. And sometimes they're just a little slow to blow the whistle. They want to let the play run out. But I would have called it a sack by Pepe on the play. And again, they don't hit the quarterback, so we don't really get a good decisive thing other than the whistle. But that would be my view of the situation. You had another play where Owe and Justin Matabike had a jailbreak sack. Coach D was at the podium later. He referred to that sack as being caused by motion that the offensive line didn't pick up correctly. So that's one that he was kind of blaming on the offensive line. It was a point that the defensive lines just look very dominant so far. And you've got to ask yourself the question of how much of that is really on the offensive line for just not getting it done, or maybe lack of continuity, or maybe a lack of the proper depth when the defenses are running some more complex rushes and whatnot, particularly today when they were in pads. And I think that question is really still up in the air. And I won't know personally, I don't believe, until we see that first preseason game and we see just where this offensive line is as a group. And I did want to pick up on that particular topic because there are several interesting points made during the interview process. I'm not a big interview guy, but I do occasionally ask a question or whatnot. John Harbaugh was asked if he'd like to have the offensive line settled by the first preseason game. His response was, I want to get this right, the right tones. I'm going to get into my acting voice a little bit here and say, he said I would love for that to be the case, with the emphasis on the word love, no doubt about it, meaning it's not that way currently, but I would love for it to be the case. So Childs Walker, I believe, asked the question, and Harbaugh definitely indicating that the Ravens may not be there in terms of the offensive line they've got out there. We did talk more about positions today with the coaches, so I think it's free and clear to talk about Daniel Fa'alele has gotten most of the playing time so far with the number ones as the right guard and Voorhees as the left guard. He looks pretty damn good. So I don't think there's an issue with him specifically. The one area where I'm not really sure about Voorhees is just how much his pass blocking is held up and how much he's contributing to the jailbreak problems that they've been happening. But a lot of it is Owe, Malik Ham, Kyle Van Noy, David Ajabo, and most of that is on the tackles. That's not as much on the guards. So there have been, I'm certain, cases where a defensive back has gotten through, and it might have been Voorhees' problem, certainly that he didn't pick it up. And it could well be other things that Voorhees is not doing properly. But of the linemen, Linderbaum, looks pretty darn good, and I think that Voorhees is one I'll be looking to play well in the first preseason game. Harbaugh is clearly talking about Faalele and I think at right tackle as well, what's been going on in terms of being set with his position. I don't think there's any question currently that the three starters on the left guard are going to be Stanley, Voorhees, and Linderbaum. Again, my take, we'll see how it goes, but those guys appear to be very solid in their spots. McCary has spent a lot of time, playing right tackle so far this year, and hopefully he is a guy who is available to play left tackle. So for that reason, I don't think they really want him to start at right tackle, but it may happen. So, certainly a possibility, and we'll just have to see how that plays out. Trying to get to the transcripts here for today to see if there's something more I can read. All right, maybe not. Okay. Talk to Joe D a little bit after that. Joe D was asked about Daniel Faalele's eventual position. How he answered that, I kind of want to get the wording right on this to look at his how he said it. But basically he said he wants to see how it plays out for Faalele at right guard before trying him back at right tackle. So that question did get asked. There are lots of questions about Faalele today of Coach D. What makes you think he might be a good fit from Childs Walker, and is there a plan to try him at right tackle from Jonas Shaffer? I asked him another question, which I want to read the response to directly. I said, can you talk a little bit more about what you've seen from Daniel Faalele in terms of both footwork, which I know you're very big on, and hands? And he said, you know what? His footwork is not bad. He's learning a new position, playing inside. Everything happens faster. The movement happens faster. The decisions happen faster. Communications happen faster. He's growing in that area. And we have to just continue to teach him to use his hands better, to relocate, either to place your hands on him, relocate his hands, etc. But it's only the first day in pads. We'll see what he does in about a week, see if it gets better. Not a ringing endorsement, obviously, of his overall play. In terms of his footwork, it sounds like he's saying it's okay. In terms of his hands, I think we're really seeing some of the things I've been talking about in the offensive line articles for the past couple of years, that Daniel Faalele is not really a guy who uses his hands effectively. So honestly, a lot of times he doesn't use his hands at all. And at right tackle, I think that's really hurt him. Coming out of Minnesota, he was a guy who I always accused of playing a little bit of patty cake, getting his hands up, but not really using his hands to strike. Playing on the inside, he has to do that. I mean, he has to absolutely get his hands on the defender. There's going to be lots of times, if he's going to play right guard, where he's going to have to make use of his size to and definitely his ability to get to the armpit of the defensive tackle to torque or turn that defensive tackle so he can pivot him to create that lane for a pull or any sort of a power run when he's opening the front gate, as I call it. So I think, it's good to see Joe D at the stand, and he had some interesting things to say. He's generally a very positive guy about his players, pretty protective, I would say, in general, about what's going on. So you get a lot of more positive than negative. He's not very specific about what's not going well. So, hopefully he's a player that Joe D's vision for him and wanting to see how this plays out at right guard really leads us somewhere, because it is time lost at tackle and it's time lost for somebody else at right guard to have Daniel Faalele there if in the end it doesn't work out. And then Tyler Linderbaum was last to the stand, and I thought Tyler Linderbaum had some interesting things to say. There's talk about additional responsibility, lots of questions. I'd rather just let you listen to the interview, since I'm not going to have a lot to add to his to his comments on the thing. But he seems to be very comfortable now at the microphone. And Ryan Mink did ask him a question about how he was dealing with chatter on social media about him. And he goes, well, I've got a series of burner accounts. I said, everybody laughing. I couldn't even hear the rest of it. And I'm trying to find it here in the transcript, and I can't do it on short order here. But actually, obviously, a very funny guy, and that in particular was a hilarious comment. So, interesting day at camp. Great to see some padded play, and see the Ravens get after it even a little more. Although the defense certainly had been doing so already. I'd say it was another win for the defense today, although they certainly let up a couple of touchdowns at the end of practice, both to Devin Leary and otherwise, a very tough day of frankly getting into position properly and being able to hold off the defense in terms of the pressure they provided. That's going to do it for Camp Notes today. Thanks for joining me. If you are listening now, I'd love for you to write a very quick review that would underscore the value of these camp notes if you like them. And it always helps to get a 5-star review in terms of directing traffic to the site and to the podcast. Thanks very much. And we'll talk to you next time on Film Study.